So you just got yourself a brand new DeWalt Miter Saw. These things are pretty awesome, but to maximize the full capabilities of what these saws can do, it's going to take a little bit of work to get the saw set up and dialed in. When they come to you, they are relatively square, accurate, but they still need a little bit of work. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that in this video. We'll cover everything from miter angles, bevel, and dial everything in so that it's perfect, so you know you're cutting the angles you should be. Let's get into it. All right, before we get started, you're going to need a couple things. First and foremost, you need something that is flat, a straight edge. Verify that you do have a straight edge. This is going to be very important when we're calibrating everything. If we don't get a solid reference on flat before we get started, then everything we're going to do is pretty much useless. You're going to want the supplied tool that comes with the saw. You're going to want a square. Now, any square will do. Just make sure it is a square. You want a digital angle finder. Not absolutely necessary, but these are very helpful, especially the ones with the magnets. You'll see when we get into it why it's so helpful. But you can still get away with just using a square. Not necessary, but a 10 mil wrench is going to be helpful when we're calibrating everything. And then lastly, some scrap material. It doesn't need to be anything special, just ensure that it does have two parallel sides. That's the most important part. And some notebook paper is going to be super helpful as well. And before we touch anything on the saw, first and foremost, we want to ensure that if it is a cordless saw, we don't have a battery installed, and if it is a plug-in saw, ensure that it is not plugged in. At no point in time should we be working on the saw if there's any power going to it. So starting off, we're going to start with the table of the saw. Now what we want to do here is ensure that the table is flat across all the different miter angles of our saw. So when we fully miter right and we fully miter left, we're looking to make sure that this table is flat. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our straight edge and just put it straight on top of that table. This is where you take your piece of paper and you're going to slide it in all these different spots to see if it's going to fit underneath our straight edge. Now, I wouldn't be too concerned with the plastic insert because that's going to raise and lower depending. Mainly look at the straight edge in contact with all your metal areas. And then once we check our miter all the way left, we'll center our saw, check again, and then we'll miter right, check, and that looks perfect. Now if there are some indiscrepancies with the table of your saw, what you're going to have to do is take off your fence. There's 4 bolts that hold the fence in. You're going to remove those, take the fence off, and then you can take either a sander or a diamond plate and smooth out all those high spots to bring the saw table down to those low spots. It will take some time, but in the long run, you're going to get the value back out that you put into your saw now. These aren't just one and done machines. These are machines that are going to last you for quite a long time. So ensure that everything is perfect now, and it'll pay off in the long run. Next, we're going to take off the fence extensions by loosening the wing nuts on the back and sliding the extensions off. Let's grab our straight edge and go ahead and place that on the actual fence. And repeat the process with your paper across that fence. We're going to check all the different spots where our straight edge meets that fence to see if our paper can go through. Now, if you do have any gaps in your fence, there's a couple things you can do. Depending on where the gap is, if you have a gap towards the center of your saw, your fence needs to come out, or at least the center of the fence needs to come out to match the outsides. So one thing I like to do is grab a stack of shims and put them in between the fence and the pivot point of the saw. Now you can use a hammer to tap them in, and what that's going to do is put pressure on the fence and push that fence towards you in the center. Before you do that, obviously you want to loosen the 4 bolts on either side. I like to fully loosen the center 2 and then just kind of hand tighten the outside too. That gives a nice pivot point for that center to move. Once you get everything dialed in, I would suggest that you go a little bit past flush. So that way, once you lock everything in and tighten those bolts down, that little bit of tension should pull that fence in to flush once you remove those shims. The other thing you can do is if you have gaps on the outer edges of your fence, you can grab a trigger clamp and go ahead and clamp the fence to the back of the pivot point of the saw and suck the fence in a little bit, tighten everything down. You might have to readjust a couple times just because you won't be able to get a straight edge on there, but that is the fastest method that I've done. Before continuing, it is very important that you get these steps down because this is the base that we're going to form everything off of. If there are imperfections within the table and the fence, that will show, and it will just create more difficulties when we calibrate all of our angles and our detents later on. So take the extra time, make sure all of this is perfect, and you'll have a much easier time when you're calibrating your saw. So now that we've verified our table is flat, our fence is flat, it's time to start cutting some angles. So we're going to start with the miter angle of the saw. I like to start on the base and then hit the bevel last. So first and foremost, what we want to do is make sure that our saw is locked in at 0 degrees. You're going to hear an audible detent. That will ensure that the saw is locked in at 0, or at least what is presumed to be 0 right now. If your saw doesn't lock in, you get it over to 0 and nothing happens, and you have to lock the lever on 0. All you have to do is ensure that these switches are rotated down. That will ensure that your detent locks in. Now what we're going to do is take our scrap wood with 2 parallel sides. Go ahead, put that on the saw, and we're going to just make a straight 90-degree cut. Now after making our cut, all we're going to do is take our right-hand piece and we're going to flip it over, ensure that it's tight against the fence, and we're going to butt the 2 pieces together. So if you look closely at the workpiece, there's a gap in the back and it's nice and tight on the front. So what that tells me is I need to move the saw left in order to compensate for that deviation. On the ring of your saw, you're going to have 3 or 4 screws that you want to loosen up. Now I like to loosen the far left screw up last. You can do the far right, but you want to ensure that your detent is locked in the 0 position. All you're going to do is loosen up that left screw, and then you're going to retighten it just barely enough to catch. Now with your middle and your right screws loose, you're just going to tap on the saw on the face here, and it should push this whole ring assembly left. A small, minute adjustment is all you need. Now you're going to lock up all these screws again. Now with your screws tight and your detent locked in at the 0 degree mark, you're going to take your scrap piece and make another cut. And the same thing, we're going to rotate that right hand side and line it up. As you can see, still a little open in the back, so we're just going to repeat this one more time. And that's what you should see right there. No gap, front to back. We've verified that our miter angles are accurate, so we want to lock in our ring. Make sure everything is nice and tight so nothing moves. So now that our miter angles are done, we're going to move into calibrating the bevel. So we're pretty much going to do the same thing for the bevel as we did for the miter. We'll ensure that our saw is at the 0 degree mark. There is a positive 0 stop on the saw, but they're never actually accurate like the detents are. So we're going to take our digital angle finder or our square and reference the table to the blade. You're going to take your digital angle finder and place it on the table of your saw, turn it on, and you're going to zero it out. Once it's zero, lift up the guard to your saw. Again, ensure there's no battery or power on the saw, and you're going to place that angle gauge right on the blade. Now, if it has a magnet, it'll be able to stick there, so you can easily read it as you adjust your saw. If you don't have an angle gauge, you can obviously take your square and go ahead and line it up with the table of your saw, and then you can verify square off of your square. But I like using the digital angle gauge. I think it's a lot more easy to read as I'm making adjustments. So on the back of your saw, you're going to loosen up the bevel lock, and you're going to find the positive stop. So you'll move the saw left and then bring it back right until the positive stop. Look at your angle gauge and reference your angle. Now determine if the saw needs to go left or right. My saw does need to go left. So what I'm going to do is grab the supplied tool that comes with the saw. So what I'm going to do is put pressure pushing right on my saw. Now that's going to give resistance as I turn this bolt down here, and this will adjust the positive stop of the saw. So as I adjust this clockwise, it'll bring the saw left, and you should see the angle gauge start to move. So once I'm displaying 90 or your square is lined up with the blade, you're going to go ahead and remove your gauge. Once you've adjusted your bevel so that it shows 90 in relation to the table, go ahead and lock that bevel down. Take a new piece of scrap, and we're going to repeat the same process as we did for the miter. So go ahead and put that scrap up against your fence, ensure that it's flat on the table and on your fence, and you're going to make your cut. As you see, I've got a gap on the top and tight on the bottom, so that means the head of the saw needs to go right. So we're going to turn that knob counterclockwise. We're going to slide our scrap piece over, loosen the bevel adjust, and take your tool, and we're going to rotate that knob counterclockwise or clockwise if you had gap on the bottom until half of the distance that we had on the two scrap pieces is applied to the top here. Now, as you see, I got a nice clean line all the way through, no gaps, so that means my 0 degree on my bevel is locked in and set and ready to go. All right, now that we have our bevel set and is zeroed out to the table, our 0 degree hard stop is set. It's time to adjust our angles and our hard stops on our power blocks. So to get started, again, remove our battery. This time we're just going to loosen the bevel lock, and we're going to slide the saw all the way left. Now that our saw is beveled all the way over, we're going to take our digital angle finder. We can go ahead, turn it on, zero it out again. Now using our supplied tool, we're going to index this bolt until our digital angle finder shows 45 degrees. You can also do this with your square by placing it in between the blade and the table at that 45 degree angle. Now once your left 45 bevel is set, go ahead, swing your saw back up to 0. Release the right hand bevel lock and bevel your saw all the way to the right. If your saw ends up stopping at something like 22.5 or this half circle mark, it's because these black pawls are in the way. Just go ahead and slide them out of the way and then bevel your saw down the rest of your way. Now put your digital angle finder on your saw. If it's not at 45 degrees, go ahead and adjust the indexing bolt on the back left-hand side of the saw. Next up will be the pawl blocks and adjusting those. So you have two settings, two different blocks. The first being 22.5 and the second being 33.9 for crown. Depending on what you're going to be using your saw for, if you're going to be running a lot of crown, I would suggest keeping the 22.5s out of the way and just calibrating your saw to the 33.9. But if you don't think you're going to be cutting a lot of crown, maybe just calibrate your 22.5s so those are dialed in. Whatever you choose, completely up to you. The same operation will apply to both. All you're going to do is go ahead and get your pull block set into place. All you're going to do is get your pull block set into place on both left and right sides, and then bevel your saw left so it sits on those blocks. So now we're just going to take our digital angle finder. If you don't have one, you can obviously use like a T-bevel with a speed square to get your angles, but I'm going to use this. Go ahead, put that on, and we're looking to find 22.5, but we're finding the reverse angle of it, or at least that's what we'll show here. So we're going to be looking for 67.5, and then we're just going to take our 10 mil and adjust this black bolt that's sitting on the pull block until we get that 67.5. So now 22.5 is set on our left bevel. We're just going to flip the saw over, bevel to the right. Make sure that the 22.5 pull block is set in place, and we're just going to repeat the same process until that side is set. So there it is. That's how you perfectly adjust your brand new DeWalt Miter Saw. Just playing around with this saw, I'm really impressed with it. This is my first cordless miter saw, and I think this is going to be an awesome addition to my setup. But tell me below in the comments, what miter saw did you just pick up, or which are you planning to adjust? Anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it.